I've been standing on stages for 30 years. I've had people cry on me, faint on me, propose to strangers on me. I've had a woman go into labor in my front row and name the baby after me an hour later. I've had a man forget his own wife's name under the lights and then remember it so loud the boom mic clipped. I thought after 3 decades that I had seen every single thing a live audience could throw at a man in a good suit. Then came the Tuesday night I'm about to tell you about, and I need you to hear it the way I lived it. Slow at first, the way it actually happened, and then all at once, the way it felt. It was 8:47 p.m. When Marcus Vail stepped off his mark, walked 3 feet past the line no contestant is ever supposed to cross, and said 6 words into a live microphone that stopped 1,000 people from breathing at the same time. You have no idea what's coming. I want you to understand what that silence felt like, because I've spent my whole life feeling silences, and I had never once heard one like that. It wasn't quiet. Quiet is a soft thing. This was silent. The kind of silence that has a temperature, that presses on your eardrum, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat like a drum somebody left running in an empty room. One of my camera guys down in the second pit slowly lowered his lens, like the shot itself had turned into something dangerous to hold. Up in the control room, I found this out later. My producer's hand froze over the switcher, hovering an inch off the buttons, not cutting, because some part of him knew that whatever was about to happen, the country needed to see it live. And behind me, on a big charity board that ran 40 feet up the back wall of the studio, the number glowed in that hospital. Blue we picked because it tested warm with donors, $2 and $11,000. Raised that night, we told America, for children's surgery. It was the wrong number. Every single soul in that building was about to learn just how wrong and how many people had been robbed to light it up that bright. I didn't move. I've been threatened before. You don't do 30 years in front of live crowds without it. In parking lots, in green rooms. Once, early in my career, by a man twice my size with a whole lot less to lose than Marcus Vail had, and I learned that night that the worst thing you can do to a man who wants your fear is refuse to hand it over. So I didn't step back. I didn't put my hands up. I didn't even look over at my security team. The 2 of them already peeling off the far wall and moving low along the edge of the stage the way they trained to. I looked at Marcus Vail for 1 full second, long enough to let him see I wasn't going anywhere. And then I leaned into my microphone, and in the voice my mama gave me, the one that reaches the last row of the highest balcony, without me raising it, I said the thing they would be replaying on every phone in America by morning. You picked the wrong stage, son, and the wrong woman. His smile cracked, just at the corner of his mouth, just for a single frame, the kind you'd miss if you blinked. Because here's the thing, I hadn't been looking at him when I said the wrong woman. I looked clean past his shoulder, into the 3rd row of the crew pit, where a woman in a headset with a clipboard clutched flat against her chest had gone completely, perfectly still. Still like a deer is still. Still like something that has learned the hard way, that moving is what gets you seen. Nobody in that audience knew who she was. Nobody knew why I already knew Marcus Vail's real name 3 days before he ever said a word to me. And not one person in that building, not the crew, not the crowd, not the man screaming into my face, knew what was tucked inside the plain white envelope sitting quiet under my stack of cue cards. But to understand what happened next and why it became the single biggest mistake that man ever made, you've got to come back 4 hours with, all the way back to the top of the day when everything still looked ordinary. The show is called Give Big, and I need you to understand up front that it is not an ordinary taping. Once a year, my network clears a Tuesday night off the calendar for a live charity spot. And when I say live, I mean live all the way down. No edits, no second takes, no 5-second delay to catch a curse word, no safety net of any kind. Real donors watching at home with their thumbs already on the screen. Real money moving through real accounts in real time. The total climbing on that big blue board while the country watches. A wrong word on Give Big doesn't get fixed in post. There is no post. It airs. It just airs. And then it lives forever on the internet, whether you like it or not. That's the whole point of the thing. That's the pressure. That's why the ratings are what they are. I've hosted it 6 years running. When they first offered it to me, somebody on the network board pulled me aside and told me the reason. She said, Steve, we've run this show with 4 different hosts and lost 2 of them to panic on air. We think you're the only one who won't freeze when it counts. I laughed at the time. I don't laugh about it anymore. Because that Tuesday, it counted more than it ever had. And I found out she was right about me at the exact moment I needed to be. That afternoon, 4 hours before Marcus said his 6 words. Everything looked the way it always looked. My stage manager, a woman named Coco, who has been keeping me on time since before either of us had gray in our hair, was walking the floor with her headset half on, pointing at Marks. My co-host, Dina, was down in the front running her lines under her breath, the way she's done 1,000 times. The audience was filing in, laughing, finding their seats, holding up the signs they'd made at home, names of kids they were given for, names of kids they lost, lights coming up hot, the countdown clock on the back wall ticking down from 20 minutes to air. And then there was Marcus Vail. I'd read his contestant card that morning, same as I read all of them. Charity side, the file said. Not a regular contestant, a featured guest, a fundraiser, a man who ran his own foundation and had come on to represent it and Match Donations Live. Smooth as glass, that card. The kind of smooth that, after 30 years, I have trained myself to keep exactly one eye on at all times. He shook my hand at the meet and greet and gave me a smile so clean and so wide you could have checked your own teeth in. Told me it was the honor of his life. Told me he used to watch my show every single night with his grandmother before she passed, and that she'd have cried to see him standing next to me. It was a beautiful little speech. It was designed to be, and that was the first thing that put the hair up on my arms. Not that it was false exactly, but that it was so finished. Real people fumble. Real people lose their thread when they meet somebody they watched on TV. This man delivered his grandmother like a closing argument he practiced in a mirror. I shook every hand on that stage that day. Contestants, crew, the sponsor reps, the whole line. But I held his half a second too long. I don't know how else to explain it to you except that my body knew something before my brain had words for it. Something in the man was arranged, staged, like walking into a house that's for sale and realizing halfway through the tour that nobody actually lives there. The fruit bowl's plastic, the books on the shelf are glued shut. Every single thing is placed to make you feel something and none of it is real. And here's the part I keep circling back to all this time later. The part I see when I close my eyes. While Marcus Vail was charming the skin off me with that grandmother story, his eyes kept sliding away from mine. Off to the left, down into the crew pit, to one specific woman, headset on, clipboard against her chest, badge that said Renata, PA, production assistant. A new hire, Coco had told me that morning. Quiet, good at her job, kept her head down and hit her marks and never once caused a problem. Every single time Marcus's eyes found her, she looked at the floor. Not the polite kind of looking away, not the shy kind, the kind of looking away a person does when they have taught their whole body that being noticed is the thing that hurts them. I've seen it exactly twice in my life. Once was that Tuesday. The other time I'll tell you about before we done. I filed it. I didn't have a shape for it yet, but I filed it. The way you pocket a stone that catches your eye and figure out later why you wanted it. I went to my mark. Coco counted us down from 10. And right before that little red light on camera, one went hot, I leaned over to my producer and I said 6 quiet words of my own, so low only he caught them. Watched the PA in pit 3. He went pale. I clocked it and didn't have time to ask. I thought maybe he thought I was crazy. That wasn't it at all. He'd seen something in the vetting file 3 days back that I hadn't finished reading yet, and my 6 quiet words had just told him that the thing he'd been praying was a coincidence was not a coincidence. We went live. Now let me stop the clock and tell you who Marcus Vail actually was, because the man standing on my stage that night, the one with the grandmother and the clean teeth, was a costume. A good one, tailored, but a costume. He didn't win his way onto Give Big. Nobody wins their way onto the charity guest slot. You get vetted and invited. So he engineered his way on, and it took him months to do it. He built himself a foundation, a real one, in the sense that it was registered and it had a website with soft photography and a mission statement and a donate button that worked. Children's surgery, kids who couldn't afford the operation that would fix their hearts, their spines, their eyes. Give what you can, it said. And people gave. Lord, did people give. $214,000 of gave over about 18 months from donors all over the country who went to sleep every night believing that a piece of their paycheck was buying some child they'd never meet a second chance at a whole life. Not $1 of it ever reached a single child. It moved, is what it did. Out of the foundation account, through a second account with a name close enough to the first to slide right past a tired bank clerk at the end of a long shift, and then out the far side into the pocket of the man himself. He did it clean. He did it patient. And this is the part that turned my stomach when I finally understood the full size of it. He'd done it 3 times before. 3 different foundations, 3 different states, 3 different names on the paperwork. Marcus Vail wasn't even the name his mother gave him. It was just the one he was wearing that season. But every con, no matter how clean, has exactly one person who sees it. One person the con man didn't count on. One set of eyes in the boring back office where nobody's supposed to look. Hers was the headset in Pit 3, Renata, and I keep calling her Renata because the name she was born with belongs to her to give out now, not to me. Hadn't always been a production assistant on a live TV crew. 2 years before that Tuesday, she'd worked for Marcus's foundation, bookkeeping, reconciliation, the dead boring back office arithmetic that keeps the lights on and that absolutely nobody watches, which is exactly why it's where the truth always ends up hiding. As she watched, that was her whole gift and her whole curse. She was the kind of careful person who couldn't let a number sit wrong. She saw the transfers that didn't reconcile. She saw the surgeries listed as funded that were never once scheduled at any hospital she could find. She saw the second account and a name that was almost, but not quite the first name. She didn't make a scene. She did the thing you're supposed to do. She gathered it quietly, a folder at a time, a screenshot at a time, printed and dated and kept. And when she had enough that no reasonable person could look away from it, she carried it to the people you are supposed to carry these things to. And Marcus Vail buried her. That's the part that still puts a fist in my chest, even now, even after everything turned out the way it turned out. Because he got to them first. A charming man with a good story and a firm handshake always gets there first. That's the whole engine of the... By the time Renata walked in with her careful folder, he'd already sat across from the same people wearing the same clean smile and painted her as the problem. The disgruntled bookkeeper, the one with access to the accounts, the one, he suggested gently, who might want to look real hard at before you go making wild accusations about a man who's given his life to sick children. He took her own evidence and he turned it into the case against her. By the time she understood what was happening, the ground had already moved. She wasn't a whistleblower anymore. She was a woman with a wrecked name, a resume that now raised questions in every interview, and, worst of all, a man who now knew for a certainty exactly how dangerous she was to him, because she was the one person alive who could still take him down. And he was the kind of man who did not let a loose end like that just walk around free. So she ran. That's what you do. New town, far from the last one, a new name, legally changed, the paperwork buried as deep as she could afford to bury it, and a job on a live television crew, because there is no better place on this earth to disappear than inside a headset and a clipboard on a busy studio floor, where the whole job is to be invisible, to make everyone else look good, and where nobody but nobody asked the PA who she used to be. And Marcus Vail spent a year and a half looking for her. I want you to sit with that. Not looking for money. He had money. He was making more of it off his 4th foundation by then. Looking for her. Because a man like that can't sleep, knowing the one witness is still breathing free somewhere with a folder in a drawer. He didn't come onto my show to win a prize or mass donations. He found out, I still don't know exactly how, and the trial never fully answered it, that she'd surfaced on the crew of a live network special. And he pulled every string he spent years learning to pull. And he got himself booked as the charity guest on the one Tuesday night she'd be standing in the pit. He came to my stage to stand 10 feet from the only person on earth who could end him. Not even to hurt her. Not yet. To remind her. Up close. In her own workplace. In the one safe corner of the world she built. To let her feel him breathing in her air again and understand, without a single word that a bystander could report, exactly how small her safety really was. The arrangement she'd been living inside for 2 years was simple, and it was cruel. If she stayed silent, she stayed buried. No name, no career, no peace, but alive and hidden. If she ever spoke, he would bury her again, deeper, and this time he'd know right where to dig. If she had walked into work that Tuesday, tightened her headset, picked up her clipboard, and had no earthly idea that the man who'd taken her whole life was about to walk onto her stage under the lights. Now, here's how I knew any of it, because you're right to wonder how a game show host ends up holding a con man's whole life in a white envelope. 3 days before the taping, my producer, The same one who went pale at my 6 quiet words, dropped a research file on my desk. We vet every featured guest on Give Big. You have to when the whole show is real money moving on live TV. The network's lawyers would have it no other way. Most of these files are nothing. A clean bio, a couple of press clippings, a note that the sponsor checks out. I skim them and sign off and forget them. But buried in the back of Marcus Vale's file, in the fine print nobody's really meant to read, there was a flag, a donor complaint from another state, about a different foundation under a different name, but cross-referenced by some careful researcher I've since thanked in person against an alias that tied back to the man we booked. It wasn't proof of anything. It was a loose thread, the kind of thing most shows would note, hand to legal, and let the lawyers grind on for 18 slow months while the man kept smiling on TV. I read that file at my own kitchen table at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I could not put it down. And I'm going to be honest with you about why. Because I think you've earned it, and because it's the only way this next part makes sense. There was a stretch of my own life, a long, long time ago, before any of you knew my face. A stretch where a smiling man with a good story took something that mattered from people I loved and walked away clean and prospered. And the reason he walked away clean wasn't that nobody knew. Plenty of people knew. It was that everybody was too polite, too tired, too afraid of being the only one to say the true thing out loud where it counted. I watched the people I love carry that for years. I promised myself, back in those days when I had nothing and no stage and no voice that reached past my own front porch, I promised myself that if I ever again found myself in a room where a con like that was happening, in a room where I had any power at all, I would not be polite. I would say the true thing out loud, and I would say it loud enough to reach the back row. So I made one phone call before that taping, just one. I tracked down a number I sincerely hoped I would not need. I wrote it on a small card. I slid the card into a plain white envelope, and I put that envelope under my stack of cue cards, and I told myself, all the way up until the meet and greet, maybe he's just a smooth man with an ugly file. Maybe the flag's a mix-up. Maybe you sit on this and you do absolutely nothing and you go home. Then I watched him tell me about his dead grandmother with his eyes on the woman in pit 3. And I watched her look at the floor. And I knew, cold and certain, all the way down, that I was going to need the envelope. We went live at 8 o'clock straight up. For the first 40 minutes, I'll tell you the truth, it was a television show, a good one. Marcus Vale was good, and I'll give the devil exactly that much, and not 1 inch more. He worked the camera like he was born in front of one. He landed his little jokes right on the beat. He talked about the kids with a catch in his voice that would have fooled me too, if I hadn't read the file, if I hadn't seen his eyes. The board climbed and climbed. The audience fell in love with him in real time, bought his charm wholesale, the exact same way the donors at home had been buying it for 18 months, the same way 3 states worth of good people had bought it before them. But in between the laughs and the gaps the audience couldn't hear, he was running a second show, and that one had an audience of 1. We had a hot mic problem that night. It happens on live floors more than you think. A channel that's supposed to feed only the in-ears bleeds for a stretch into a monitor speaker near the pits. For about 10 minutes in the middle of that broadcast, one of those floor channels was open, and through it, in the dead spots between rounds while the audience was clapping for something else, I started to hear Marcus, not his TV voice, his real one. Low, casual, aimed down and to the left at pit 3. You look tired, Renata. You sleeping all right these days? A beat, a laugh for the crowd. Then, under it, funny, running into you here. Small world, isn't it? Real small. Another round. Another climb on the board. Then, soft as anything. Careful with that clipboard, sweetheart. You always did drop things when you got nervous. I set my cards down on the podium. I've been running on instinct for 30 years, and every one of those instincts was standing up screaming at me at once. And on a live stage, when your whole body is telling you something is wrong, you have exactly one tool that works, and it's the same tool I've used my entire career. You tell the truth out loud in front of everybody, and you let the room decide what to do with it. So I walked toward the pit, slow, and I did not look at Marcus Vale. I made a point of it, so he filled the not looking. I looked at Renata, and I said, as soft as I could make a thing carry across a live studio, you all right over there? The whole audience felt the shift before a single one of them understood it. You can hear 1,000 people change their minds at the same time. It's a sound, a kind of drawn breath that runs through a room. The laughter drained right out of it. Renata's hands had gone white knuckle on that clipboard. She didn't answer me, she couldn't. But she looked up just for a second and met my eyes. And in that 1 second, I saw the whole 2 years of it. And Marcus Vail. Marcus understood in that exact same second that I knew. I watched it cross his face. I've watched a lot of faces from up on a stage. It's most of the job, really. I watched the charm flicker, and behind it, for just a flash, the animal that lives inside a cornered con man showed itself. Because here's the thing I've learned about men like him. When they're cornered, they do not run. Running is for people with a conscience. A cornered con man attacks. He reaches on pure reflex for the exact move that saved his skin the last time. And the move that had saved him the last time was turning the witness into the criminal. He turned to my cameras on my stage, on live national television, and he threw that smooth voice wide open, and he said, "You want to talk about somebody on the stage, Steve? Ask your own production assistant why she left her last job. Go on. Ask her about the money that went missing when she was doing the books. She's been lying to every one of you this whole time. Pull the record. She's the thief, not me. Her. And God is my witness. For one long, sick moment, it worked. I felt the room tilt. I heard the murmur change its shape. Felt $214,000 of manufactured doubt swing through the air and land. All of it. On the one honest person in the entire building. Renata's face went past white to gray. Because she had seen this exact play before. She had lived on the losing end of it. It had cost her her name the first time. And now here it was again, word for word, on the biggest stage of her life, in front of the whole country. She looked like a woman watching her own ghost walk back into the room to finish the job. That was the moment Marcus Vail believed, with total confidence, that he had won. And that, right there, was the moment he made the biggest mistake of his entire life. Because that's when he crossed the line. The real one. The 3 feet of stage no contestant is ever allowed to cross. He stepped off his mark. He walked those 3 feet toward me fast. He raised his hand and pointed his finger straight into my face, close enough that I could see it trembling. Not with fear, with fury. And he said the 6 words I opened this whole story with. The 6 words that stopped 1,000 people from breathing. You have no idea what's coming. And now you know what those 6 words actually were. They weren't for me. He didn't care about me. I was scenery, an obstacle between him and the thing he'd come for. He was looking past my shoulder the whole time, the same way I'd look past his, straight down in the pit 3. And what he was really saying, in the private language only he and Renata, and now I could read, was this: say one more word, and everyone you've hidden from finds out exactly where you are. The silence with the temperature, the lowered lens. My producer's froze a hand an inch off the switcher, and me not moving. You picked the wrong stage, son, and the wrong woman. Here's what he didn't know. Here's the single thing that flipped his triumph into the worst night of his life, live, in front of the whole country. He had picked the one stage in all of America where the proof was already in the building. I reached under my stack of cue cards, and I did not hand that white envelope to my security team, who by now had Marcus flanked. I handed it to my producer, and I said it right into my live mic, loud enough for the last row. Open it, read it, on air, right now. Marcus thought I could see him thinking that I had some kind of evidence of his threat in there, something to press charges with. But I didn't need that. 1,000 people and 7 cameras had just caught the threat with their own ears and eyes. What was in that envelope was a different thing entirely. And it was the last thing on earth he expected. Because here's what I never told you. When I tracked down that number 3 days before, the number I prayed I wouldn't need, it wasn't a lawyer's and it wasn't the police. It was hers. Renata's. Not Renata the PA. Renata, the whistleblower, from 2 years and 1 name ago. That careful researcher's flag in the back of the file had a second half my producer had almost missed. The alias in the out-of-state donor complaint had also been named 2 years prior by a bookkeeper. And when we ran that bookkeeper's old name against our own crew roster, against the legal name changes on file with HR, it lined up with a new hire in the production team, APA. Badge said Renata. So I called her. The night before the taping, late. I told her who I was, and I told her I'd read her file, the real one, the buried one, the one that got turned inside out and used against her. I told her, straight, that Marcus Vail was going to be standing on my stage the next night, and that she had every right in the world to call in sick and never come near that building, and that I would understand it completely and think no less of her for a single second. Or, I said, she could bring me the one thing that would end him for good, because she'd never let it go. the real ledger, the one she smuggled out of that foundation 2 years ago and carried through every move, every new town, every sleepless night. The account numbers, the transfers, the almost name, the surgeries that were never scheduled, all of it printed and dated and true. The people who were supposed to read it had refused. But she kept it anyway, the way you keep the one thing that proves you're not crazy. She'd handed it to me that very morning, in the parking garage before call time, in a plain white envelope, with hands that shook exactly the way they were shaking now down in the pit. She'd said one thing when she gave it to me: if this goes wrong, it goes worse for me than for him. You know that. And I said, then I'll make sure it doesn't go wrong. A promise I had absolutely no way to guarantee, and made anyway, because sometimes that's the only thing a promise is for. I put it under my cue cards and I prayed I'd have the nerve to use it. My producer's voice was shaking, but he read it. He read the account numbers on live national television. He read the transfers, dollar by dollar. He read the second account with the name close enough to fool a tired clerk. And then he read the real name behind the whole machine, Marcus Vail, and the three names before it, 3 states, 18 months, $214,000 that never once bought a single sick child, a single thing. The wrong number on the board behind me wasn't a typo. It was a crime, glowing 40 feet tall in hospital blue, standing right over the head of the man who'd built it. Marcus lunged for the envelope. He got half a step. My security team had him before the second step landed, arms pinned, and as they turned him toward the wings, he was screaming that we'd regret it, that I had no idea who I was dealing with, that lawyers would bury me. And every camera in that building was drinking down every word of it, live, uncut. I looked at my lead camera operator, a man I've worked beside for 6 years, and I said it quiet, and I said it like I meant it, because I did. Don't you cut a single frame. Roll every camera in this building. America needs to see this one all the way to the end. But I wasn't done. And I want to be honest with you about why, because it wasn't the con that lit the fire in me. I've seen cons. The world is full of cons. What lit me up was her face. 2 years of a careful, honest woman being told by everyone with any power that she was the villain in the one story where she was the hero. I was not. I decided right there, on my feet, on live TV. I was not going to let the cameras go dark on that same lie one more time in her life. So I stayed on my feet and I started making phone calls, live, in front of everybody, because I wanted every smooth, smiling man watching that broadcast at home, every man in America who believes he can bury an honest person under a better story and sleep fine, to understand that there is a whole country of people who will pick up a shovel and dig her right back out. The first call went to my attorney. I put it on speaker and I held the phone to the mic. Fraud investigation, I told her. Tonight, not next quarter, tonight, full weight. She said yes before I finished the sentence. And then she said, Steve, keep that ledger somewhere safe. And I told her it was already the safest piece of paper in America because 200 million people had just watched it get read. The second call, my producer had pulled the number during the read, went to the donors, the real ones, the people who go into bed believing they bought a child a surgery. We opened a line, right there on air, a number scrolling across the bottom of the screen, for every single one of them to call, to be counted, to be heard, and eventually to be made whole. And that's when the third thing happened. The one I did not plan, the one that still gets me when I think about it. Dina, my co-host, the woman I stood next to on that stage for 6 years, who I thought I knew everything about, stepped up beside me. She took the mic out of my hand, which she has never once done in 6 years. And her voice was shaking, and her eyes were wet. And she said, Steve, I have to say something. Right now, on the air, before I lose my nerve, I've been getting messages for months. Crew people, freelancers, folks who worked as fundraisers in the other cities, people who saw what this man did and were too scared to be the only one to say it. She was never the only one. Dina turned and looked straight down into pit 3. You were never the only one, honey. I have a folder too. Renata put her hand over her mouth. She had spent 2 years of new names in dark apartment and looking at the floor, believing all the way down to her bones that she was alone in it. And on live television, in front of 1,000 people in that room and a country outside it, she found out that she never, ever had been. And then the whole crew moved at once. I didn't tell them to. Coco didn't tell them to. Nobody did. The camera operators, the grips, the floor manager, the audio techs, they left their marks in the middle of a live broadcast, which is the one unforgivable sin of our whole business, and not one of them cared. They crossed the pit and they put their bodies between Renata and the wings where they'd taken Marcus out, and they made a wall of ordinary working people, the ones who never get a camera on them, standing shoulder to shoulder around the one of their own who've been carrying this alone. That's the image I'll take to my grave, not the con man, not the ledger, that wall. And then off to the side, near the audio cart, I saw the kid. There was a young intern out there, 19, maybe 20 years old, first real job in the business, the kind of kid who's just grateful to be holding a cable. And it turned out, I learned this after, that Marcus had been working him too, sweet-talking him for weeks in the run-up, telling him he had a real future in the fundraising world, that a sharp young man like him could go far, that all he had to do was overlook a couple of small things and keep a couple of small secrets, the exact way these men always start. And now the kid was standing there frozen, with his face falling apart, looking like the floor had opened under him, looking like every bit of this was somehow his fault. I walked over to him. In the middle of everything, I walked over and I got down so we were eye to eye. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, son, look at me. Look right here. None of this is on you. Not 1 minute of it. A grown man lied to you on purpose because lying to good young people is what he does. That is on him. It is not on you. You hear me? He couldn't talk, but he nodded. And then he cried, the way you cried when somebody finally let you off a hook you didn't even know you've been hanging on. And I held on to his shoulder until he was done. Then I turned back to the camera because there were people out there in the dark watching this on a phone, in a locked bathroom, in a parked car, in a break room, who needed to hear the next part more than anybody in that studio did. Everybody watching tonight, I said, listen to me now. There's something starting right this second, live on this stage, and I'm going to call it the open ledger. You know why? Because somewhere out there tonight is a person who saw something wrong and got told by everybody who mattered that they were the crazy one. Somebody with a folder in a drawer and not one soul who read it. Somebody who told the truth and got buried alive for it. And I am telling you right now, we are going to be the people who read the folder. I told them my whole fee for that special was going into it, every dollar of it, and I didn't have to think about it. I told them, before I'd even finished, that my producer was already talking in my ear and the network was matching it. And I told them we were calling every sponsor whose logo was on that board before the broadcast ended. And I didn't even get through the sentence because half of them weren't waiting for a call. They were already texting in. And the donations, the real ones, the ones going to the right place this time, they started climbing while I was still talking. A retired school teacher in Ohio put in $40 and typed the message that came up on the screen I gave to his fake charity last year. Here's where it should have gone all along. A man in Arizona gave $12 in one word, believe. And weeks later, in the mail, I got a card from a little girl in Oklahoma, hand-drawn, that said, for the people nobody would listen to. It's on the wall of my office right now, framed where I can see it from my chair. I look at it more than I look at any award I've ever won. And then I did the thing the whole night had been building toward without my even knowing it. I turned to pit 3 and I asked Renata to come up. She didn't want to. 2 years of hiding does not let go of a person because a man on the stage asks nice. She stood there gripping that clipboard like it was the last solid thing in the world. But the wall of crew around her sort of gently opened and Coco put a hand on her back and she came. She climbed up out of that pit and she stood next to me under the hot lights on live national television under her own real name for the first time in 2 years. This is Renata, I told the country. That's the name she chose to survive. But she has another one, her real one, and she's going to be able to use it again out loud without being afraid. And that starts tonight. 2 years ago, this woman tried to stop exactly what you all just watched. She did everything right. She did everything you're supposed to do. And she lost her name, her job, and damn near her whole life because the people she trusted to read the folder wouldn't read it. So tonight she is not hiding in a pit on my crew. Tonight, if she'll have it, she is the very first advocate of the open ledger. She looked at me. She looked at the wall of crew. She looked out at 1,000 people who were already on their feet. And she said, yes, just that, just yes, into my mic in a voice that cracked right down the middle. And the whole building came up roaring. Now let me tell you how it went after the cameras finally cut. Because I know you want to know. And because the ending is the part that matters. Marcus Vail was arrested that same night and charged inside of a week. Wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering across 3 states, under all his names. That ledger, the one Renata carried through 2 years of running, the one everybody before me refused to read. It was the spine of the entire case. Prosecutors told me later they'd almost never seen documentation that clean from an inside. He had built his whole life on the safe bet that nobody would ever be willing to sit down and read the boring back office pages. And in the end, the boring pages were the exact thing that put him away. He's serving 9 years. The donors are being made whole slower than anybody wants, the way these things always go, through the courts and the settlements and the paperwork. But it is happening, dollar by real dollar. Renata got her name back, her real one. I'm not going to say it here because it is hers now, hers to hand to whoever she chooses, and she has earned the right to never hand it to a stranger. She reclaimed it in a courtroom, in front of a judge, and I'm told she didn't cry when she did it. She just said it clear, and then she said it again, because she could. About a year later, she called and asked me to come watch her speak. It was a conference, a whole ballroom full of people who had blown the whistle on something and gotten buried for it. Every kind of person you can imagine. And Renata got up at that podium, and she did not shake. Not once. She told a few thousand strangers exactly what it feels like to be cast as the villain in the one story where you were the hero. And at the very end, she says something I've carried with me every single day since, something I want to give to you now. If you think you're the only one who saw it, you're not. You have never once been the only one. Somebody just hasn't found your folder yet. The whole ballroom stood up. I stood up right along with them in the back where she couldn't see me crying, which is exactly how I wanted it. People ask me about that night all the time now. It comes up in every interview, and they always ask the same thing, Steve. What went through your head when a grown man walked off his mark and pointed his finger in your face on live TV? And I always give them the same answer, because it's the true one. And I promised myself a long time ago I'd stop being polite and start telling the truth out loud. I tell them I wasn't watching him. I never once was. I spent that entire show watching her hands. I watched them shake on that clipboard through every round. And I just knew that if I didn't say something on that stage loud enough to reach the drawer she kept her folder in, she was going to spend the rest of her life believing she was the only one, and alone and crazy. So I said it as loud as I know how. And then I made good and sure she never had to go back to being invisible again. Here's what I've come to believe. After 30 years of stages and one Tuesday night, I am never going to shake loose. Some people build whole worlds to hide behind. Nice logos, clean teeth, dead grandmothers deployed like closing arguments, stories good enough and smooth enough to bury an honest person right underneath them. And they get away with it for years, sometimes for whole lifetimes, for one simple reason. Looking away is easy. Speaking up is lonely. And most of us, most of the time, are just trying with everything we've got not to be the only one holding the folder. But every once in a long while, somebody refuses to look away. And the second they say the true thing out loud, loud enough, on the right night, in the right room, it turns out they were never the only one at all. They just needed one voice with a big enough microphone to prove it to the rest. So if you're watching this alone tonight, if you've got a folder in a drawer and a story nobody will read, and a little voice in your head that has spent months or years telling you that you're the crazy one, the only one, the villain, I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me good. You're not. You have never, one single time in your whole life, been the only one. So do something for me right now. Type one word down in the comments, just one. Type scene. Because somewhere out there, scrolling past this at 2 o'clock in the morning with the sound low so nobody hears, there's a person who has been buried under a bed of liar story, and they need to watch that one word roll up the screen 1,000 times, 10,000 times, and understand in their bones that a whole country full of total strangers is still willing tonight to read the folder. Hit that like button, because it puts this in front of the exact person who needs it. Share it with the one name you're already thinking of right now. You know who it is. And subscribe, because next week I'm going to tell you about the woman who stood up in my audience with a secret she kept for 30 years and changed her own life with a single sentence. And I promise you, you are not going to believe how that one ends either. You picked the wrong stage, son, and the wrong woman.